Hello and welcome back. One of the most common questions I'm seeing online at the moment is, what should I use, heart rate or power in watts or pace? And the answer to that question really comes down to what's right for you at the right time. So if you want to know what the best option for you to use is, stay tuned. Before I get started, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the little bell notification so that you don't miss out on future videos. And please leave a comment and let me know what you like to use and how you found it beneficial. So we'll start off with heart rate, which is something I've actually gone into in a fair amount of detail when I talk about training zones in another video. So you should be able to see a link to that video on screen now. Heart rate is a fantastic intrinsic measure of intensity. So it's really good reflection of how much stress your body is under during a given session. Where heart rate is particularly useful is when you're trying to actually measure and maintain a very specific intensity zone. And this is particularly useful in training where you're trying to go after a specific adaptation. Let's say, for instance, that you've identified an area of your physiology which you think is lacking and you want to fill in that hole. Heart rate will allow you to work exactly at the intensity where that hole can be worked on and can be filled in. If you go above that hole, or if you work too hard, you'll simply start working on something else, which may not be an issue at all. So heart rate can be very, very good at allowing you to have precision and consistency with what you're trying to work on. Heart rate will also take into consideration extra work due to environmental factors. So let's say, for instance, you have a tailwind behind you when you're going for a run. That run might feel extremely easy to hold a high pace with because the wind is helping you. But then you turn around and run into the wind and now you're having to work a hell of a lot harder. And so pace hasn't really been an accurate measure of intensity for that session because you've had external factors which have made it easy and then have reversed and made it hard. Heart rate will sit in the middle and tell you exactly how hard you're working regardless of how fast you're going. There's also instances where you don't feel particularly motivated to train and your perception of the training session and your effort goes up. Heart rate won't take that in consideration. It'll tell you exactly how hard your body's working. So sometimes this is a blessing because it can tell you that you just need to get on with it. And sometimes it's a bit of a curse because it can leave you feeling really despondent when the session feels really, really tough. But that's the thing. At the end of the day, mentally, you're going to make the decision whether you want to stop or whether you're going to keep going. Heart rate's particularly useful for watching your load management because it is reflecting what's going on inside the body and the type of stress that's on your body. Whereas if you're trying to just hold a particular wattage, some days you might be working a lot harder than you mean to, and some days you might not be working particularly hard at all. And your load won't really be reflected by this because the wattage will just seem to be the same. Whereas if you're going off heart rate, it will actually tell you if that session was particularly stressful on the body or particularly easy. And over the longer term, this is much more effective for avoiding burnout and overtraining. Power and pace are fantastic measures of external work output. And your capacity for work is basically what determines your performance. So if you're regularly doing fitness testing and you're measuring your work capacity over time, then you'll have a good idea of what sort of an expectation you can have when it comes to racing and how you're going to manage your pacing strategy. The issue with these is they're not particularly consistent. If you've got external factors like wind, you might actually be working a lot harder than you mean to be able to maintain a certain pace. And when it comes to wattage, you might be quite tired or dehydrated, and to be able to maintain a certain power output, you might actually have to be working a hell of a lot harder than you mean to. And this can really influence the intensity distribution of your training. So where does this leave us with making a choice? Well, you should look at it quite simply like this. If you're trying to work on your physiology, you're trying to build capacity and your ability to endure, then you should use heart rate because that allows you to be accurate with your training intensities. But if you're looking at coming into racing and you want to work on a particular pacing zone or a particular intensity that you want to become efficient with and gather a really good feel for, then you can start using wattage and pace as being the dictating factor for your training. So it really just depends on what the right tool is for the job at the time you need to use them. The mistake you're trying to avoid is thinking that one's better than the other. They simply just give you different types of data to be used differently. If you're trying to work on your physiology, use heart rate. If you're trying to work on a pace or power output, then use pace or power output, use your watts, use your kilometers per hour. But just don't assume that one is better than the other. A lot of people say you should just go off feel and all the rest, but that's leaving a huge amount to chance. In training, you really want to be as accurate and meticulous with the distribution of intensity and have a bit of focus to the training session. And if you're just going off feel, there's really no way to assess what you've done and to see if it's effective because you haven't really had very good control over it. You've gone on how you felt on the day, and that's highly variable. When you get closer to racing, feel does start to become a little bit more important because heart rate on the day can be all over the place when you start getting excited and a bit of nerves come into the equation. But also, wind conditions and environmental conditions can throw off your pace pattern. So you do have to be a little bit more in tune with the feel of certain intensity, because your wattages or your pace might not match up on the day to what you usually can sustain. So it is important that you use heart rate and the numbers in training to actually develop a feel for what you know you can sustain, so that when you come to racing, you have actually got the experience of holding these intensities and understanding these intensities, so that you're familiar with them. And then on the race day, you can have that flexibility and confidence that you understand and know your body. I think overall, when you understand what each tool is doing, you can start using them effectively together. But trying to say that one is better than the other, or one doesn't reflect what you're going to do in racing, isn't really something that you should get into the habit of thinking, because when you're training, you're not racing. You're trying to develop your physiology, you're trying to develop your ability. When you're racing, you're trying to produce the best possible performance on the day that you can. And if you tie yourself down to these metrics on the day, you can risk a big disaster. But if you don't tie yourself down to some sort of consistency over long-term training, then things are chaotic, and it's very hard to make progress when you can't measure, assess, and then make the relevant adjustments that you want to make. If you have any questions or thoughts on what I've discussed, please leave them in the comments below and I'd be happy to discuss them. This isn't an effort to put somebody off what they're used to using. It's simply trying to fill in the blanks and help you understand where certain things can be beneficial and how to put them all together. If you like this video, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and keep on training. I'll see you next time.